Every successful person got there by going through tough times. Success is a hard-ass teacher who likes to knock you around along that journey. You know, it takes real guts to not give up and keep going. We'll hear stories about failures and how these leaders flip the script to create success. I'm John Schultz. Join me and let's discover how success is never really overnight. So welcome to the John Schultz podcast. I'm so happy to be here today with Dede Griesbauer, an amazing person. I know I start off saying that with all my guests, but I can't help it because they're all amazing. I have to do it. I can't help myself. But I'm going to go through a little bit of the highlights of this of Dede and this incredible story we're going to hear. First of all, she's a professional athlete. She is a 3-time Ironman champion. And in her second year as a pro, she won one. I mean, out of control. A 2020 Ultraman world record holder at 50. I'm over 50, so you're giving me all this energy. Just by reading that, I feel more energized. In 2021, you were the second fastest Ironman bike split ever by a woman. You swam at Stanford, team captain, 10 NCAA All-American honors, and a 1992 NCAA champion. USA swim team, 1989 through 1994. An MBA at Wharton, an equity trader. I mean, like, this is like out of control. I'm feeling like I got to go out and do more after this podcast. But welcome. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. I've listened to a couple of your podcasts, and I think I'm one of the more unusual guests. At least my career path is slightly different to some that have been on your show in the past. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, unusual is you've just done more. So that's what's unusual about you. So there you go. So thank you for coming. So happy to be here with you. So I'm so interested on how people evolve. And, you know, how did they get all these thoughts in their minds and how did they get in the direction that they go? So I'd like to, and I know, you know, it's funny. I've heard you say you're an anti-specialist and you've been your whole life, right? So let's go back to when you were a little girl and how did this happen for you as far as getting yourself into whether it's sports or just this focus that you have?
Yeah, I was a sporty kid. Like I liked, you know, it was a different era, right? So it was come home from school, throw your book bag on the ground and go outside and be home by dark, right? And get into all kinds of mischief and trouble and, you know, whizzing around the neighborhood on our bikes and hanging out at playgrounds. And so I was a sporty kid, but I was dreadfully unathletic. So any sort of organized sports, I played basketball, soccer, tennis. I had a go at gymnastics. That was very short-lived. And I think my gymnastics coaches were thankful for that. I wasn't super coordinated. I was kind of a gangly kid. And so the safest place for me was in the pool. And grew up not, you know, my parents were athletic, but not pushy at all. And so my introduction to swimming really was just country club, just drop me off at the pool in the morning and pick me up in the evening with my eyes like bleeding from all the chlorine. And I sort of took to swimming, but it was always something that just sort of fit in around the rest of my life. It was never a singular focus. When my parents realized that morning workout at 5 a.m. before school was part of the swimming trajectory, they decided that boarding school was an excellent option. So off I went to boarding school in Connecticut, but I had a passion for, I don't know, seeing what was possible for myself. It wasn't about setting records or I never saw myself as, sure, I had this sort of Olympic aspiration because you watch the Olympics on TV and it's, you know, it's eye-opening and they just seem like, you know, superheroes out there. And so I wanted that, but I never actually really thought it was possible, but I was curious to see what was possible.
It's amazing. So, all right. So it's funny because, you know, hockey, some of these sports, you got to, for ice time, you got to be up so early in the morning for the parents. It's such a crazy commitment. But now my new advice is you should send them to boarding school, right? So you don't have to get up early.
Well, exactly. I mean, no joke. You talk about ice hockey. I mean, Angela Ruggiero went to the same boarding school that I did. So I think her parents wised up the same way. And they're like, no 4 a.m. ice sessions. You're going to boarding school. And it was the same for my parents with the pool. They're like, yeah, I don't know that 5 a.m. swim workouts are necessarily in our comfort zone. So off you go. And honestly, I didn't do the doubles. I didn't swim morning workouts in boarding school. It was a seasonal sport. It gave me ultimately better balance and patience. I mean, you look at kids today and they're specializing in a sport at 6 years old and have, 8 different private coaches because they're all going to the majors. And I never had that kind of pressure. Swimming was always something that I loved, but it was something that grew organically.
I like when you said this anti-specialist, I love that because I don't think any of us truly really know what our gifts are. The whole part of life to me is searching for that. And then all of a sudden it may show up and, look at you, 50 years old, winning an ultra, man. I mean, that's the beauty of not actually specializing. And I've also heard you say, the shiny object, going after the shiny object, which is your goal, right? But to you,
Sure.
the shiny object isn't an exact thing. It's just so give us how that drives you. Like, because obviously you have a lot of drive. And as a young person, you showed that, right? You committed early. Not everybody does, but in the trials and tribulations of getting there is what makes the person. What would you say inspired you, and how did it sort of move around?
Well, post collegiate swimming, I mean, my career up through my swimming years was fairly, I mean, I don't want to say fairly traditional because I was given an extraordinary opportunity and gift to be able to swim at the level that I did. The incredible thing about surrounding yourself with extraordinary people is that you come out of those experiences feeling actually quite mediocre. So I came out of Stanford swimming feeling like not that great a swimmer because I never made an Olympic team, right? I went to 2 different Olympic trials, never made it. But I did achieve quite a lot in the process of trying to get there. So when I retired from swimming, my life was sort of conventional at that point. I wanted to further my education. I got into Wharton and started a career on Wall Street, all very traditional stuff. And just during my second year of studies at Wharton, I was studying for finals and I was kind of burnt out, and I turned on the TV and I saw the Ironman and I was just gobsmacked. I was like, this is unbelievable. Like, this is insane. Like, where do I sign up? And I did one, again, driven by that sort of curiosity of, is this possible? Can I do this? I had, obviously the swimming background. I had done some running, which I enjoyed. In the summer before business school, I had ridden my bike across the country with a boy I was trying to impress. So I had sort of the individual pieces. And so I saw this on TV, and I decided that for the 3 months I had between finishing business school and starting my career on Wall Street, I was just going to train as hard as I could and take a swing at this Ironman thing. And I did it, and it was a bucket list, and I was done.
But is that like, because like not being able to go on to the hot, like, listen, where you went in swimming is off the charts. And obviously you weren't even recruited. Like, you actually got on the team, through your perseverance and determination, which I also know that that's a big trait that you have. But, when you didn't get there and you went into business, what got you to, what was the thing in your brain to go do this next thing? Or was it just something to try and just,
It was really like, for me, it was a way to, I've been a lifelong athlete. And so after my retirement from swimming, I just didn't think being a sedentary human being was in the cards for me. So I continued running. I ran some marathons just for exercise and good health. And I had done this one Ironman after business school. And I just had this thought in my head a few years later that I wanted to try it again. I wanted to train a little bit better. I wanted to be a little bit smarter. And I signed up for another Ironman in 2002. And I ended up I didn't train any harder or smarter, and I went in dreadfully underprepared, but managed to, because of the tremendous, and this isn't like, I'm not a superstar gifted athlete, but I had a tremendous aerobic engine from years and years and years of swimming that still, despite the fact that I had been 5 years retired from swimming, or maybe even 10 by that point, it helped propel me. And I ended up qualifying for the Ironman World Championship as an amateur. And it was at that point that I enlisted the help of a coach, because I thought if I went out to the big island of Hawaii in the shape that I was in when I did the qualifying race, I would die. And ultimately, it was the coach who proposed a couple of years later. She said, would you ever consider quitting your job and racing professionally? She said, I think you do really well. And that's where the shiny object comes in. It's like you see this shiny object in the store and you're like, I have to have that. It was just this gut response that I think I said yes before my brain even had time to process it. Getting my husband on board actually was surprisingly easy as well, because I came home that night and I told him, I was like, Karen said the craziest thing to me. She said I should quit my job. Like, I have a good job. Like, I'm a vice president in an investment firm in Boston at that point. And I look at my husband, got him a little drunk, but I was like, Karen said the craziest thing. She said I should quit my job and race professionally. And he sobered up on a dime and he's like, if you don't go in and quit tomorrow, I'm going to quit for you. And so we both just sort of had this reaction. Like, at the time, I didn't envision myself being a world champion, a world record holder, any of that. I just knew that it was something I had to try to do. And I thought it would honestly just be a crazy adventure for a year or two. And then I'd be right back in the seat trading stocks a couple of years later. But then it just it took off, and it's just, every step along the way has felt like the right thing, and it's not conventional. And I think my parents are still getting over it, but because it is so unusual. But I have really just turned this passion that I have literally into an entire career that I never had envisioned when I took my job on Wall Street.
It's funny. It's like most pro athletes, their second career is like investing in tech startups or actually getting a real job. Like, you're completely the opposite. Here you are on Wall Street, successful, MBA, Wharton, obviously very smart. And you did what everyone in my mind somehow on the planet wants to do, which is actually do what they are here on the planet for, their gift. How do you, I know you asked, how does that decision process happen? Because, obviously that's not an easy decision.
It was not an easy decision. It was actually, quite frankly, terrifying. When I went in, it was like, I am quitting my very well-paying Wall Street job to do something ridiculous. I can't tell you the number of people throughout my nearly 20-year career now as a professional triathlete have said, is that a real job? Like, no, it can't be true. Like, tell me more about that. Like, it just doesn't make any sense when people ask what I do for a living. I was like,
right.
I start easy. I'm like, I'm a professional athlete. Oh, and then they start to calculate my age a little bit, and they're like, what sport? And then when I say triathlon, they're like, is that a real thing? So it's so unconventional that it's actually almost laughable, but it just has been something that I have been drawn to do. And my husband and I have a little sit down every year and sort of decide, like, is it worth one more year? Are we still loving this process? Because financially, the other pro athletes have it right? They be a pro athlete and then they invest in tech startups, and financially, right, that's a better way to go. Like, I did not quit my Wall Street job with visions that being a professional athlete was going to make me a gazillionaire, right? I could have lived a very comfortable life living out my career as on Wall Street and made a lot of money, but probably not been as happy or healthy as I feel like I am right now. And ultimately, that is more important to me. Like, at the end of the day, I'll be honest, I wouldn't mind a little more money, but how much money do you need, right? We're happy, we're doing fine, we're living above the poverty line, like, everything is fine, we can pay our bills. And this just has felt like a much better way, a much more organic way. It feels much more like me than I felt when I was sitting on a trading desk.
Well,
and don't get me wrong, being on the trading desk was very much in line with my personality. It's competitive, it's fast paced, it's all of those things. But when I'm presented with this alternative, it's like, pick A or B, and it's like A, just absolutely A. And there was no question about it. And the fact that I've been able to keep that ball rolling and turn it into a career that not only includes racing professionally, but coaching. I do live commentary for Ironman and all sorts of other sort of ancillary things. It's just really exciting.
So take us to that race, that would you call it the pinnacle, the Ultraman win? I mean,
yeah, not yet. There's more to come. So the realization, right? So I've had a really good Ironman career. And in 2016, I had some run injuries and I wasn't able to run, but I was able to bike. And my coach had the suggestion that there's an event called the Time Trial World Championship, and you could choose your duration of 6, 12, or 24 hours. And so she presented this as sort of something for me to sink my teeth into while dealing with a run injury. It was a goal, it was a focus, it was something, other than just training, which I still enjoy the process, but without a goal in sight, it does get hard over a period of time. And so she presented me with this race and she's like, you choose the duration, you can do 6, 12, or 24, but I think this would be great for you to do. And so I looked at the distances, I was like, 6 hours. I was like, I ride 6 hours twice every week. Like that doesn't inspire me. The 24 scared me a little bit because for as hard as I work, I sleep more than most infants. Like I go to bed at 7 o'clock at night. And I was like, I can't race through the night. I was afraid of the sleep deprivation aspect of it. So I was like, 12 hours seems like a good hedge between like being sort of gnarly, but not totally insane. So I chose the 12 hours. And this was in 2016. And I got about 8 hours into that race. And I set a course record of 258 miles in 12 hours. I beat all of the men in the race. My husband is standing in the feed zone. They're essentially a parking lot where every time you go through, it's a looped course. So it's 18 miles. You just ride as many times around this 18-mile loop as you can in 12 hours. And people were saying to him that like, they were chatting, right? And they're like, who is the woman out there? And he was afraid to say anything, but he eventually was like, yeah, that's my wife. They're like, dude, she's gnarly. And I had this realization at hour 8, 12 hours in, I'm happy as a clam. I don't feel tired. I'm not, getting irritated. I was happy as a clam. And I had this realization of like, oh, snap. Like, I think I'm good at this ultra endurance stuff. And it was this realization that like, where else could I go? Like I have the mindset for it. And the thought of riding my bike for 12 hours straight didn't faze me at all. And that was my parlay into sort of the ultra world, like beyond Ironman. Like Ironman in itself, it's 140.6 miles in a single day, 2.4 miles of swimming, 112 miles of biking, and running a marathon. And the fact that there's something even crazier beyond that, I was like, I wonder how I do at that. And it took several years because it just didn't fit into my Ironman racing career at the time. And so when I finally got it together to race Ultraman, I raced Ultraman Florida, and at the time had no concept that they kept world records for things like that. And before, it's a 3-day event. So day 1, 10K swim, 91-mile bike. Day 2, 171-mile bike. Day 3, double marathon. So it's 3 days, which actually is kind of cushy. It's not like you get to sleep in between, which again, very important to me. But the night before the final day, I sat down with my coach. She was part of my crew. You're self-supported through this. So you have a crew that follows you around in a van and essentially feeds you and takes care of you and looks after you. So she was part of my crew. So we sat down the night before day 3 and she said, if you run, and I don't even remember the time, but it was a very manageable pace for me to hold through a double marathon. She's like, you'll break the world record for Ultraman. And I looked at her as if she'd shot my dog. And I was like, why would you tell me that?
And this is global, right? You're talking the global, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And so I didn't like the pressure necessarily of having this time, like the world record, it just had never occurred to me, and having that added pressure going through day 3. But her point was, look, you're going to be suffering out there like a dog. And she's like, you need to know why you're suffering. And so just having that notion of you could break a world record if you just stick with it was super, it ended up being a great inspiration. And, the world record, it's exciting. But there's more out there. There's more out there that I want to achieve with this distance.
I love this because, you mentioned mindset, right? And, swimming was there and you thought that was it. You had to make an adjustment. Then, and even this Ultraman, it came from someone else believing in you, pushing you to do something else that you didn't even think of. So mentoring and mindset, because to me, I think those are the keys to like success in longevity. What can you give the audience as far as, because you're as disciplined and I would say, mindset oriented as anyone I've ever spoken to. What advice, what experiences would you give them to know what that actually means? Because
Yeah,
everyone reads it, right? It's like a word.
yeah, some people would call, like, again, um, it is a mindset. Other people would call a spade and just say, I'm stubborn as hell. Like I'm stubborn. I get something in my head that I think should happen a certain way. And I force it to a point where sometimes it doesn't work out. And that gets kind
Would
of
you call
ugly.
that conviction as much as stubborn, or?
It could be conviction, but there's a stubbornness. Like when I push myself in a race so hard that I black out and wind up on the pavement, that's not necessarily using that skill or that personality trait in a positive way. But what I have discovered, and I guess my takeaway, is that part of what got me into this in the beginning, I'm not a super gifted, talented athlete. Like I'm athletically almost completely inept. Like if you hand me a ball and a bat, I don't even know what to do with it. But what I discovered, and everybody has this is available to everybody, whether it's in sport or in life, there's something that everyone's good at, right? For me, it's to your point, persistence, determination, mindset, drive. And the drive isn't necessarily for the world record. It's a drive for personal excellence. But everybody has their own special gift, and you could use that gift sort of day in and day out to achieve whatever it is you want to. So it can be just sort of maintaining a sense of humor in the face of failure constantly. It can be, for me, I've been knocked down plenty of times. I've had a great deal of success, but with all of those successes behind it are 10 or 15 failures. So being willing to persist in the face of those failures, even when people are telling you to quit, whatever it is that you're good at, you can use that to outperform your God-given gifts. Like it's not talent for me, it's persistence and mindset.
It's persistence. So, and the magic question, how do you find that gift? Because I'm looking at your career, and it's almost as if you never would have known unless someone pushed you. So I guess it's just being around, hanging around the hoop. I mean,
I'll actually take the flip side of that and say that it's because people said I couldn't, right? I mean, the best way to get me to do something is to tell me, and my husband makes a joke of it. He's like, I bet you can't unload that dishwasher.
Listen, you gotta use it, to get all different things, right? All different results.
It was honestly, going all the way back to my Stanford career, it was the fact that I was recruited by other schools and great schools and had scholarship offers to some fantastic universities and swim programs. But Stanford was like, if you get in, let us know. They didn't want me. And I was like, you guys made a mistake, and I'm going to prove it to you that you were wrong. Same sort of thing with the Ironman. I'm not a likely Ironman champion. I'm not. And even now, given my age and what I'm trying to achieve at the age of 51, people are skeptical, and that fires me up. So it's not that I was encouraged by some very special people along the way, but I was also doubted by a lot of people that gave me a fire in my belly, for sure.
You're like Rudy, you're like Rocky, you're Michael Jordan-esque.
I'm a combination of Rudy and Rocky. There you go.
if you watch Michael Jordan's documentary, it's all about him firing himself up, finding ways to fire yourself up, finding your ways, to I guess, ignite that gift, whatever it is, especially when it comes to sports. But that can be applied to business. That can be applied to music.
Yeah.
It's like, because you are your own worst enemy. And I guess you being in a sport that's all you, what tidbits can you give us on, how to apply that maybe even just to everyday life, right? Because
I guess that's just to my point, is that we all have that special gift, right? And it's up to you to figure out what it is, but I think we all know it, right? In the back, you might not be courageous enough to acknowledge it, because we all tend to be our own worst critic, right? In putting ourselves down, like, oh, that's not possible, you could never do that. But if you just give yourself the chance, right? You don't have to invest your entire life into this crazy idea. But if you have this business idea that you think is possible, make it be a side hustle for a little while and nurture it and see where it can go. I think the biggest tragedy is to not try. And that's why when my coach suggested I quit my job and race professionally, I was like, when am I going to have an opportunity to do something like this? Like, to me, being a Wall Street trader, like, I can do that almost any time, right? It just wasn't special to me. But when you have that special opportunity, you have that special idea, don't just run away from it because it seems hard or you don't know how you're going to get to the finish line with it. If you just start it and nurture it, it can grow to things that you would never think would be possible.
Well, like you said, the ego's pounding. You're like, you can't do that. You can't be that. You're not good enough to do that.
Yeah, you're a businessman. You can't start a career as a musician. Well, why can't you go home and practice for a few hours a night and play at a club on a weekend and see where it goes? Like, even if I have bucked convention from the start, like walking away from a perfectly good job to do what? Like, it makes no sense. But at the same time, it's led to this wonderful thing. So there is a gut check, and you can't be reckless, but a calculated decision making, yeah, go for it.
But you have to believe it. Like, you have to believe it. I mean, look at, McDonald's, Ray Kroc. Look at Kentucky Fried Chicken, Sumner Redstone from Viacom. They were all in their 50s when they started their company. And there's many more out there. And you're, on the athletic side of creating, unbelievable things. And I think we're all living older anyway. I love the side hustle note, right? Because just try things and you just never know where, because someone may come to you, just they came to you and said, why don't you try this?
Yep.
Or why don't you meet this person? But if you're not in and around it, it's never gonna happen.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So how did you come back? Because, again, there's also different levels of belief. In 2011, you had this crazy crash, right? Like, how many bones did you break?
6.
And how did you, like, come back from that? I mean, I want people to hear these comeback stories, because, like, the myth to overnight success means there's gonna be a lot of stuff that you're gonna have to deal with to actually get to that, Ultraman win. So how'd you come back?
Well, I would say if I had to pick a career low, that would absolutely be it. So I raced Ironman Frankfurt. It's the European Championship in July of 2011. And somewhere in the course of the bike leg, I entered a roundabout, and it had just started to drizzle a little bit. And the roundabout ended up being lined with cobblestone. And wet cobblestone is probably, it's worse than ice. So I crashed. My wheels went right. I went left. I was riding at about 22 miles an hour when it happened. And so, yeah, I skidded along the pavement, kind of like a pebble on a lake. And I ended up breaking 6 bones. I was airlifted to a trauma center in Frankfurt. Didn't know, one of the curses of having my last name be Griesbauer, everyone assumed I was German. So these German doctors would come in and start babbling at me in German. I was like, I have no idea what you're saying. I was by myself. My husband wasn't with me. So it was scary. I wasn't aware of the extent of my injuries because my head was cleared. I was released 3 days later. They wanted to admit me to general ward, but I really just wanted to get back to the United States. So I knew I had a broken elbow. I did not realize I assumed I had some broken ribs. I did not realize I had broken my pelvis in 2 places, as well as my hip, when I started to travel through 2 major international airports on my way back to the United States. So it wasn't until I arrived back that I realized the extent of my injuries. And I was told by an orthopedic trauma specialist that it was over. I would never be able to run again, that I would never be able to compete again. And I knew I was facing a hugely long recovery. And by that point, I was 41, which is already pretty old for an endurance athlete. And I thought, this might be it. But my love of the sports, and it wasn't necessarily at that point about salvaging my professional racing career. It was just the fact that I love to run. And I wanted to be able to, even if it's to run 3 miles 3 times a week until I'm 80, I want to be able to do that. Right. And so I had to start the rehabilitation process. I wasn't willing to accept that I would never run again. I wanted to see if I could heal in such a way and get strong enough in such a way that I would be able to run again, because it wasn't it wasn't about career at that point. It was about love of sport and love of physical activity, and realizing that being an active human being makes me happy and makes me a more productive human, whatever my job is. And so I got to the point where I could run, and my bike numbers were starting to come around, and I was like, well, why can't I race again? And it wasn't an easy trajectory. It wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm running, bam, I'm back out on a race course, because my return was too aggressive, and I suffered injuries for probably 3 years after that, because I had such horrific imbalances left to right side, because all of my injuries were on my left side. And so while I did come back, it was not a linear path back to, yes, I'm the way I was before my crash. But it's made me a stronger athlete, because I've realized the importance of being in the gym. It's made me a better athlete ultimately, because of the things I had to go through during those years of coming back to full racing.
Amazing. I mean, and you see it a little bit in Tiger, right? What he's going through in the golf world, right?
The fact that he is out there at all, like, as my husband said, he's probably doped up on so many painkillers you don't even want to know about it. But the fact that he's even playing when it seemed obvious at the time that there's no way he's ever going to be able to load that leg again, and the fact that he's out there playing professional golf and making cuts is really, it's unbelievable.
It's incredible. So would you say, like, what was your most valuable teaching moment? All right, because you've had so many things go on in your career. Was it that accident? Like what was the sort of biggest thing that helped you in your whenever
I guess,
time in your life?
I mean, I guess it goes back to, my college decision process, that when Stanford said no, I don't think no is a roadblock. I don't think no is a roadblock. Find a way around. The answer might be no, but there's always a way to find a way around. No, you're not good enough to swim at Stanford. No, it's completely unrealistic to walk away from your well-paying Wall Street career at the age of 35 and become a professional athlete. No, you're never going to compete again. I just think ultimately, if the old saying, when there's a will, there's a way, no it's not the final answer.
I love that. And listen, people need to see extreme to maybe dial a little bit in their own lives, right? Because like not everyone's going to be able to do what you do, and they shouldn't have to. Everyone has their unique thing, but
I don't advocate, like I'm not saying run out and do an Ironman, but hey, if you don't think you can run a 5K, get up and walk around the block a few times. Like, it's going to make you better ultimately. Again, like I said, no, you can't have this musical career if you're a whatever financial consultant. Well, you know what? Try.
It's so good. So I always say, like, how do people find their voice in their industry? And, you're in a male-dominated industry, I guess, as far as training, or is that change? Like, is that changing?
It's yes and no. I am very blessed. We as triathletes are very blessed that the sport of triathlon has had equal prize money from the onset.
Great. Terrific.
Men and women are paid exactly the same in prize money. The difference comes in sponsorship, right? A male might make X number of dollars for a bike sponsor. A woman probably makes half that. For some reason, there is still this convention that men sell bikes and women can't. And so that we lag in certain areas, we lag in representation. We have fought for about 10 years now to get equal starts at the Ironman World Championship. It was always based on size of field. So the men, there'd be maybe 50 men and 35 women, but finally this year, after a very long battle, we're getting equal starts, and that's equal visibility, and so on and so on. So in some ways we are very equal in terms of prize money, which is very unusual in professional sport, but in other ways we still lag behind.
And then now you're announcer, right? So how did that, how's that feel to actually be, because that's media, right? That's even a different way to, enjoy what you do, maybe even longer, right? When you can't.
Yeah, 100%. They invited me to be a part of their live broadcast team. And at first I was a bit intimidated. I said, I'm not a professional commentator. I don't know the first thing about how to do this. They said, no, but you know a lot about the sport and my passion for the sport. And I can share that passion with people that are watching, whether it's supporters of the athletes out on the race course or people who sort of trip on the broadcasts accidentally and are like, hey, what's this? This is kind of cool. Because that's how I found the sport, right? I turned on TV and there it was. And so if I can do that for somebody else, and motivate them to try something outside of their comfort zone, not necessarily an Ironman, start with a sprint, but if you can be inspired to be a better version of yourself, I'm happy to play that role. And it's made me a smarter athlete because I watch the best in our sport executing at their craft. And some days they have brilliant days and they're absolutely unstoppable and I'm inspired. And other days they're lying on the side of the road because something went wrong. And you learn through watching how important it is, resilience and staying with it and what can happen. So it's made me a smarter athlete as well.
And you're creating longevity for yourself. I mean, it's just another way to create and be around what you love. And you're certainly qualified to be doing that. And I'm sure, that could be and go on longer and longer in your career, which is terrific. Make you be around it, right? Like, cause you always want to be around what you love.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't want to outlast the love of the sport. Like sometimes you find athletes that get burnt out in their sport and they end up sort of hating it, resenting it. I want to quit while I still love it. But right now I feel good about that. My love level is still high. So I'm doing okay.
That's awesome. Well, I want to thank you. I mean, if this doesn't give people motivation, I don't know what would, listening to this. And I wish you all the best of luck. I really appreciate you coming on. How can people find you? Because we want to, obviously have the audience, if they want to learn more about you, what's the best way?
I have a website, dedegriesbauer.com. I think most of my social engagement goes on through Instagram, and I'm at Dede Griesbauer. So you can find me there.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. I'm, it's going to be awesome. And thank you again so much for being here. And I will hopefully meet you in person soon.
Yeah, John, thanks so much for having me. What a great opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.